Who doesn't love a good merger or acquisition? Probably anyone who's never been through one, or those who have, but who have also made a lot of money. Mergers and acquisitions are not for the faint of heart. I've been through a global billion-dollar one before, and let me tell you, I learned a lot. So in this video, I'm going to share some of the lessons I learned that apply to businesses of all sizes. We're going to talk about the three most important elements of a successful merger and acquisition rebrand, and then I will end with four principles to keep in mind to keep everything moving on track and as smoothly as possible. So let's get started. Here's the thing that most people get wrong in terms of a merger or acquisition rebrand. They wait until the deal is done. And that is wrong for three really important reasons. First, the brand has value. If you don't know how valuable the brand is before the deal, you don't know if you're underpaying or overpaying for it. Second of all, the price of the deal, the price of the rebrand should be built into the price of the deal. You don't want to have to take money away from marketing to redo your signage because that's going to take away your ability to generate leads. Finally, it's important to set expectations. I once had to have a very awkward conversation with the former owner of a business we bought in India. He did not understand why we were taking his business's name off the side of the building and putting up ours. Now, if that expectation had been set in the beginning, he would have been ready and we wouldn't have had to have that super awkward call. Speaking of expectations, it's important that everyone, especially folks at the top, understand that a rebrand takes time. It is not a one and done situation. And everybody is going to need time to get used to the new brand, the new rebrand. Employees, prospects, clients, everyone needs time to get through it. So everyone has to be ready for that, or you have to make certain that your team understands that this is not going to happen overnight. The best way to think about timing is to think about it backwards and forwards. So think backwards from the day of the launch. What needs to happen the day of the launch? You have to, at the very least, I would suggest you have an endorsement put over the acquired brand or merch brand's logo that says, now part of Spacely Sprockets. And what else? What about your communications plan? You have to figure out how you're going to talk about the merger or acquisition as soon as it becomes public. More on that in a little bit as well. And then you have to think forward. So think forward about what happens next. So what has to happen in the next 30 days, the next 120 days, etc. We have a free guide sample timeline that you can download to give you a sense of the kind of things you need to think about and when. You know, client conferences or trade show appearances or new product releases, those all will play an integral part of your communications rollout plan. Next, the human factor. As you may have noticed, humans are a lot. We're kind of complicated. And so we have to be very careful about how we think about the impact that a merger or acquisition has on humans. And here are three really important reasons why. First, information vacuums. Humans are not typically comfortable with big question marks about what's happening to them. Our little brains don't like that. And so they will either try to fill that vacuum with information that they create up in their heads, or worst case, they will listen to the rumors, the gossip, the water cooler talk, and go with that. And your customers and prospects, it's not just about your colleagues, your employees, your customers and prospects will do that too. They will wonder what's happening. And you know who's going to fill that void for them? Your competitors. And they are not going to tell the story you want your customers and prospects to hear. Speaking of employees, that is a huge part of the human factor as it relates to rebrands of mergers and acquisitions. You know, strip away the spreadsheets and the financial modeling. What you have is rooms full of people who are anxious, who are scared, who are wondering what's happening. They've been with companies for a long time. They've worked hard. They part of their identity is wrapped up in the brand. They have the same mug they've been using for the last 6 years with the logo on it, and it's very easy for them to get distracted, and it's very easy for their work to suffer. In fact, research is unambiguous and frankly a little alarming. Employees' anxiety around mergers and acquisitions isn't improving, it's getting worse. Trust in immediate managers dropped from 48% to 29% between 2022 and 2024. Average employee turnover after a merger or acquisition can get to 50%. And diagnoses of anxiety, depression, those increase after a merger as well. Your best employees, the ones you need, are the ones that have the most options. So you have to be very intentional about how you communicate with your employees to make certain that the 50% that leave isn't the 50% that you need. And when it comes to anxiety, we're not just talking about employees, clients and prospects can get anxious as well. Brands are emotional by design. In fact, I define a brand as the emotional connection you have with the people who are most important to your success. So if you're having a merger or acquisition and it's impacting existing clients, their existing clients, then it's really important that you work hard to make to ease that anxiety as much as you can. Okay, how do you do that? Well, you lead with the narrative, not the visual rebrand. I get it. The visual rebrand is the cool part, right? A new logo, maybe a new website, swag. But as much as I love that and as important as the visual rebrand is, you've got to get the narrative sorted first. That has to come first. That has to drive everything else you do. Here's where your brand's messaging framework comes into play. I've done a lot of videos about the brand messaging framework, and I'll put the links in the description. But the message around your merger or acquisition rebrand has to be in line with your brand messaging. The key is to talk about your merger or acquisition rebrand in the context of your messaging framework. How does it support the reason you exist? How does it make it better of what you do and the needs and wants that you meet? How does it help your clients, your business? When people understand why something is happening, they are much more likely to support it. All right, as you go through this journey, here are four guiding principles that will help keep everything moving as smoothly as possible. There will still be hiccups, but these four principles will help. First, build consensus. Build consensus before you need it. Find the influential voices in your business that are likely to support the merger or acquisition and get them on board. And then slowly work your way towards the influential skeptics and then work to get them on board, to get them to see the value of what you're doing. And here's also something important. Your senior leadership has to be visibly behind the rebrand and everything that goes along with it. It can't be that they know about it. They have to visibly be behind it and do the right things. For example, getting rid of their old business cards, if business cards are still a thing. It's important that they lead by example, which is why we call them leaders. Number two, educate, don't just announce. Compliance comes from being told what to do. Championship comes from understanding why. We had what we called role specific brand training. So we explained the brand and its intent, the rebrand and its intent to sales differently than we did to, say, operations, differently than we did to marketing, differently than we did to client service. The important part is to make certain that people understand how a rebrand impacts them and their ability to do their job. We learned without a doubt that the more you educated people about the brand, the more likely they were to support it, the more likely they were to champion it, and the more smoothly it went. Next, Celebrate often. This is something that a lot of organizations don't do. Celebrate the important milestones. 30, 60, 120, even a year out. What gets celebrated gets repeated. And so make certain that when something goes right, everyone knows, everyone can be proud of it, and everyone can replicate it down the road. Next, over communicate everything. There is absolutely no such thing as over communicating in situations like this. You have to be consistent, you have to be authentic, and you have to be compelling, but you have to do it. Even if you don't know the answer to something, it's better to say, we don't know yet, but we will tell you as soon as we do. Saying nothing makes everything worse because of that information vacuum we talked about already. Here's why over communicating is so important during the rebrand after a merger or acquisition. The merger or acquisition is pulling people away from something they love or something they're familiar with or something they understand. And that's hard to do. But if you also give them a path towards something, it's a lot easier. Let me repeat that. You've got to give people a path towards something as you're pulling them away from something they love and care about. Okay, we've got some free downloads for you. As I mentioned, we've got a sample roadmap of a brand migration, and we also have a white paper called Rebranding After an Acquisition. You can find the URL to both of those in the show description. All right, before we go, I would love to know, I'd love to hear some of your war stories. What are some rebranding mishaps that you've seen happen? I want to see if there's any out there I haven't heard before. Okay, that's it for this video. You know the drill. Like, subscribe, tell all your friends. And of course, stay on brand.